whether you use outsourced talent or not, that we're investing in developing people as human beings and also professionals, because I don't think you can clearly divide that line any further. A lot of people like to treat business and personal as if they're separate, and they are just so intertwined, especially in a remote environment. I think that's our responsibility as leaders.
Welcome back to another episode of the Frustrated CEO Podcast. My name is Patrick Lyons. I am one of your co-hosts. I'm here with my friend, my colleague of, it's going on almost a decade at this point, Patsy Feeman. Patsy, good to see you again.
It's good to be here.
It's been a long 10 years for you, hasn't it?
It has.
I knew it.
It's another podcast.
Maybe a podcast that I'm not part of so that you can actually speak freely. We are here today with our guest, David Nilssen, who is the CEO of Doxa Talent. Today, listener, CEO, Frustrated CEO, we're going to talk about what you need to know about building future-proof teams. It is a new war for talent. Which is one of those never-ending topics. So let's dive into it. As I already mentioned, David Nilssen is the CEO and co-founder of Doxa Talent. Doxa is a company that helps businesses scale by building high-performing global teams. He is a seasoned entrepreneur and a thought leader. He's spent the last 2 decades launching and leading successful ventures, including his first company, Guidant Financial, which he grew into a category leader. Through Doxa, he's redefining how companies think about talent, how they think about culture and scalability, proving that offshore teams can be both strategic, and this one is important to us, values aligned. David is passionate about the future of work, the power of distributed teams, and helping CEOs unlock growth without sacrificing what matters most. David Nilssen, welcome to the Frustrated CEO Podcast.
Thanks for having me on today.
We're excited. All right, so let's dive right into it, because when we talk about what frustrates CEOs, getting the right team in place, putting a high-performing team together is it's right there, if not the top of the list. It's usually in the top 2 or 3. But let's start with some context. What has changed most dramatically about the talent landscape in the past 5 years that from your perspective, David, just CEOs can't afford to ignore?
Yeah, great question. It's interesting. I'm not sure it's just one thing. I think the entire landscape is completely changed. The latest statistic I saw was that 77% of employers are saying it's hard to find talent, and that's more than double than just a decade ago. The causes aren't probably related to just one thing, but this perfect storm of a shift in demographics, a change in employee personas, and this is post-pandemic. And then the normalization of remote work. And I think a lot of people are waiting for us to get back to normal. I hear that all the time. I can't wait till things get back to normal. My perspective is the squeeze that we're feeling today is not temporary. It's structural, and it's going to be here for a long time.
Early in the pandemic, we had I guess right in the middle of the pandemic, we had a guest on, Ben Pring, we've had him back a few times, futurist, and he talked about remote work, right? But at the time, everyone was forced to go remote. But to your point, there were many leaders, probably some of our listeners, who wish that we could go back. And what Ben said, and I've not forgotten it, is that genie's not going back in the bottle. So how do you adjust as you've worked with leaders who are waiting for it to go back to normal? And maybe that's really just it. It's grieving the loss. It's not going to happen, right? It's not going to be. And now adjusting. Maybe let's talk about what are some of the adjustments that you've seen or that you recommend that help a CEO embrace remote work as opposed to see it as a necessary evil or something that they want to undo.
Yeah, well, I mean, first of all, I want to share my perspective. So I have now about 1,000 employees across 6 different countries, and we have 0 office space whatsoever. So I'm a huge advocate of remote work. But I'm also aware that for some companies, it's okay to have an office, and if that works for them, then it's okay to lean into that. Actually, the place that I think is the most dangerous is the hybrid environment, because in the hybrid environment, you're paying for both, but you can't be best in class in either. So the question that you're asking is like, well, what adjustments do you make? Well, first one I would tell you is commit to one strategy. Like you create a situation. I saw the other day that I think it was actually yesterday that Uber is one of just the latest companies that's calling people back into the office for 3 days a week. And just like lots of leaders, we're hearing them say, "Well, we tried remote work, it didn't work," or we can't be as collaborative or innovative. And so what they do is they sort of split the middle and they say, we're gonna be a hybrid organization. But I liken that to owning a house. Like if you bought a house today and you're paying for that mortgage, those utilities, the electricity, the water, the insurance, cleaning, like all the things, but you only live in the house 1 or 2 days a week, like most of us would think that's madness. And yet that's what companies are doing all across the world with hybrid work policies. So I'm not necessarily against being in an office, but I am definitely one of those people that believes that either be in an office and get the benefits of that, or be out of the office and get the benefits of that. Don't neutralize them. Now, in terms of my business, we decided to go fully remote. I've got 2 companies, again, a number of employees, and all of them are remote. And we looked at a lot of different horizons, like, hey, where are they more productive? And actually what we saw is with our remote workers, they were more productive overall. They weren't distracted by all the things that are happening in an office, and they weren't having to commute to and from work. So we're actually getting more consistent work out of them. In terms of employee experience, I think you can actually be consistent in both. The hybrid is inconsistent, but you can be consistent in both. From a management style standpoint, I think a lot of people, and this is probably one of the reasons why most companies love in-office work, is that they can see that people are there. And they look at it as like, I'm trading dollars for time. But we think about it in terms of management by objective. It's like, hey, this work has a value to it, and so we're going to, we're going to pay for that value. I don't care necessarily if somebody can get that done in 6 or 7 hours versus 8 or 9 hours. And then you've got training and how we communicate, the costs, even how we recruit or where we recruit, and then how we build our culture. All those things are dramatically different inside of that. So my big I would say starting point for any leaders to get very clear on who you want to be and what office space actually caters to that. For us, we're a global organization. We want to be distributed across the globe. So being remote makes sense. But if I have a centralized operation for my leaders and I'm remote everywhere else, I'm going to default to in-office practices. And I create an unlevel playing field for people to participate. So that's why we chose to go remote, is I wanted to expand the talent pool from which we could be a part of and the cultures that we're participating, and then obviously enjoy some of the economic benefits of making those decisions as well.
Those at least 4 areas that I captured, where are you more productive, employee experience, management by objective, and the last one, training. That is not a business as usual way of managing or working. Are you having to learn how to do that all over again with this remote environment?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I will tell you, the thing I always tell people is we are not perfect. We have perfect intentions, right? So I'm a lifelong learner, and I think any good CEO has to sort of take that mentality, because the world is so dynamic. The talent landscape is dynamic. Technology is dynamic. Even how we buy and the services we consume are dynamic. So if we're not constantly evolving our practices, we're going to become outdated relatively quickly. So that is for sure a reality no matter what. And
then is it your senior team that keeps an eye on that, that evolution and what's working and what's not?
Well, I mean, yes, certainly we have our leaders are sensitive to that, but I mean, we're an organization that takes feedback from our team on a regular basis. So we're constantly pulsing our organization for feedback. I mean, my belief is that our team members are the ones that are closest to the work, right? And they're the ones that we should be asking for this feedback to help us continue to adapt and evolve. So It's not just one, department or one leader that's looking out for it. We're all stewards of the culture and stewards of the success of the organization. And so, I'll give an example. We do a quarterly town hall, and one of the things we ask for is feedback on what are they curious about? What are areas of the business that we need to continue to improve or need to shine a spotlight on? I think that user-generated feedback is much more powerful than, a couple of people from their ivory tower looking down and saying, I would like to change this today. We try to involve everyone in that particular part of the process.
I like that you're asking questions to get specific kind of feedback too.
Yeah, I think you have to, right? I think asking good questions helps you get to the root problem, right? And we can see symptoms everywhere, but the question is, do we really know what we're trying to solve for? And I think just involving our people is really important. There's a mantra in our organization we use, and that's anyone that's going to be impacted downstream needs to be involved upstream in the decision-making process. And that's all about stakeholder management. So our team members hopefully feel that they're empowered and actually have permission to provide that feedback because it's all in, the spirit of getting better every day.
So that's not a workforce as usual kind of process or employee, and at least in my experience. Do you hire for people that want to engage, want to learn, want to give feedback, want to be involved in the evolution of a culture?
Well, the short answer is absolutely yes. I think it's really important in any company that when you're hiring for people that believe what you believe, have your values, right? Our values are, we call it the core values. It's curiosity first, ownership mentality, relationship matters, and then excellence every day. And ownership mentality is really about owning your own experience and bringing your own thoughts and ideas to the table. We also use this mantra, we're a gym, not a spa. And that's basically to say hey, you got to take ownership in this. We can only take you so far and give you the right tools and equipment and training, but you got to do the work. And if you want to change your environment, then you also have to be willing to speak up and share those experiences. And so, yeah, for sure. It's something we try to do, but I will tell you, it's really hard, particularly when you're working with global talent, because in the US, we're a little bit more comfortable with what I would call uncomfortable situations. We challenge authority a little bit more. But in some of these developing nations, like I have offices in the Philippines and Colombia, and I say offices, I should say talent footprint. Those workers are used to more hierarchy in the way that people do business. They don't generally contradict the leaders. They don't like to, speak up when they see something that's wrong because it's not generally an acceptable practice. So we have to actually train and retrain people on what's the culture we're trying to provide and how you can best show up. So it's a little bit harder when you're integrating cultures from all over the world, but I think it's a really important thing for us, and it's actually, I think, a really great skill that we're teaching the people that are part of our organization.
David, a number of episodes ago, we had a CEO on who talked about the work dictating where the employees are. So in other words, that there are some jobs which can't be done remotely, and therefore just need to be clear about that. Set the expectations with your people, and right. So the work is physically on site or physically in the building, whether that's, to your point, maybe not, maybe the hybrid model. It's interesting as you talked about that, makes you think about, makes you question the hybrid model. We can talk about that in a bit, but so usually the work dictates whether the employees can be remote or not. It in theory, but some of the decisions that you're seeing to bring employees back into the office seem to be less about the work and where the work needs to be done, and more either fear-based or if I can't see them, they're not working. That's kind of an old mentality. Or it almost feels like it's an admission that we just can't manage people unless they're all within these walls. Like our systems and our infrastructure, we just don't have it's a different set of skills. It's a different set of skills for the leaders. So, and I see you nodding. For the person who's listening and not nodding, go over and watch us on YouTube and you can see David nodding. Okay. So, but now lay that, well, first of all, comment on that. And then how does that then impact a CEO's thinking or decision on outsourcing? Like I'm afraid of offshoring something when I can't even manage, we can't even get maximum productivity out of the people that we have here unless they're all physically in these walls. And now you're going to talk to me about the benefits of offshoring?
Yes, there are some businesses, right? Like hospitals, childcare, mechanics, that you have to have physical proximity in order to deliver the service. That's not going to change. And I'm not going to spend time combating that, because that is true. There are some businesses there, but that's the slim majority. Slim minority. It's so few companies that are really limited by proximity. And so from that standpoint, when I look at service-based businesses like my own, they can be remote. In my opinion, they should be remote. But what you said a second ago is what I believe, and that is that if remote fails, more times than not, it's a failure of leadership than a failure of the strategy itself. Being remote, there are companies like me that have proven many, many times over, you can be fully remote. You can still have collaboration and communication and innovation and connection. We actually define our culture as a culture of connection, and I'd love to get into that at some point if we get a chance to, but you can have all of that in a remote environment. But what it requires us to do is be, one, committed to the strategy, committed to evolving as leaders. And I talked about that earlier. We're so tuned into managing by sight, trading time for dollars versus outcomes and objectives, right? We don't have to be as clear in an office in terms of, what's the real strategy? What do we expect? We pick up a lot through osmosis. We train by side saddle. I mean, in most businesses, and I'm going to talk, about your first day on the job, right? You join, and what will typically happen is they'll say, oh, Dave, welcome to the team. Sit next to Sally. Watch her for the next 2 weeks. You're going to pick it up and you're going to be great. And I'm oversimplifying. I'm being a little dramatic to make a point, but we train through osmosis, not intentionality. In a remote environment, you cannot be sloppy. It requires you to have really defined processes and procedures. How do you select, and how do you onboard, and how do you maintain that employee experience over a long period of time? And if you don't intentionally engineer those, then you lose the connection altogether. So I think what ends up happening is people say, we want to go remote. It's sexy. That's what people are asking for, and they're voting with their feet. But then when the rubber meets the road, the leaders are not adapting fast enough, and they're blaming it on remote work versus their inability to change.
So what's the adaptation for the leader that needs to happen?
Well, look, I mean, the same things are true. Like when you're leading, right? You got to be very clear on what the strategy is. What's the role that person plays? What do you expect of them? What are the activities and actions that are going to get them there? What are the tools and technologies that will enable that? How do you build relationships? Where do you go for information? It's all the same stuff. But in this particular case, it's the gotta minutes, the knocking on the door and saying, hey, do you got a minute? And those drive-bys that take so much time, you don't have that same ability. So you have to be more intentional about how you onboard people, making sure that they're clear. What's the org chart look like? What's our 5-year strategy? What is the expectations of our department and myself? Like all of that stuff just has to be more clear and readily available and accessible in a remote environment. So I don't think the fundamentals have changed. The delivery mechanism has. And aside from that, then I think the leaders just have to be more intentional with their time. And I remember when I was in an office, I would see people, as I'm walking to the restroom or going to get a water break or having my lunch, and I get a chance to connect with them. Well, that doesn't happen in a remote environment. So you have to actually intentionally design those to have your regular one-on-ones, to make sure you're connecting with people outside your department, and that you're, I'll give an example. I do we call it kamustaan, which is a Tagalog word in the Philippines for connection, right? So the kamustaan is just, I get together with a handful of about a dozen of our team members once a month, and it's a new people every single time, just to connect as people. It's completely unscripted. I have no bullet points. I'm not trying to sell them anything or convince them of something in the business. It's just to get to know them as people and professionals. It's the stuff that we would have done over the water cooler before, but because we don't have that, I have to create the water cooler experience.
And I'm loving the fact that you're talking about how intentional you need to be, because what you just described is sorely missing in a lot of businesses, regardless of whether they're all in person, hybrid, or remote.
100%. Well, I said this earlier, and I would love to chat about it for 2 seconds. We figured out long ago, and I say long ago, that's like 5 years. But when we moved to a remote world, it was pretty clear to me that our practices were way outdated. So to your point, like we fell on our face constantly. We still do today. But we eventually said, look, culture for us is that everyone's empowered to achieve their best. That's what we really want, is people to get to work and be able to achieve their best. In an office, it is more about family and fun, and you've got the ping pong tables and the beer kegs, and you have these fun company events. But in the remote world, it's more about personal development. It's more about purpose, and so you have to sort of change the way those things are done. And so we said everyone has to be empowered to achieve their best, and we say culture is connection, and it's across 5 horizons. So the first one is connection to the purpose. Then connection to our client, so they really understand our client and who we serve and what's important to them. Accessible leadership. The Kamustaan I described a minute ago is a piece of that. It's some of the rhythms we've built to make sure that there's no ivory towers, that we're all in this together. The fourth is just connection to their team. And so we do a lot of great team building and team experiences, but in a digital environment. And the final is connection to their career path. Right now, 40% of workers, and this is per McKinsey, 40% of workers are looking for a job right now. And the number one reason is they don't see a path forward for them to grow. And that to me is critical, especially in a remote environment where the physical relationships are not quite as sticky, right? So we have to work harder to help develop them as people and professionals to see an opportunity for growth. And my belief is, as a leader, our job is to prepare our people for their next role, whether it's in our business or not. And so one of the things that we try to do is have conversations with people from the very beginning. Like, you're signing on today, we're gonna work hard for 2 years together. My question is, where do they want to go after that 2 years? And it may be in a totally different direction, and that's fine. I'm going to help them do that. So we start the conversation early that they may outgrow us, we may outgrow them, or they may take on a new role within our organization, and that's okay. And as long as we have that conversation, we're less likely to get a sneak attack resignation, and we're more likely to have really intentional conversations around how they develop and continue to stay and be a productive citizen within our organization.
So this is another shout out to people to go to YouTube, because you can see how excited Dave's getting around this topic. And I wonder what it's taken for you as a senior leader to develop the skills that you just described.
The answer is I don't know exactly, but there's a moment, and I apologize for getting emotional. There's a moment for me that I really remember like it was yesterday, and that was 2008. In 2008, my first company, Guidant Financial, is in the financial world. In 2008, we were helping people to use their retirement assets to invest in non-standard assets like real estate. So 2007, the real estate market crashed. 2008, the credit freeze happened. We all know the markets eroded, and that business struggled. In fact, there was a moment I remember it was October of 2008, we ended up having to do a layoff. And then we had to do a second round 30 days later. And 30 days later, we did a third round of layoffs. And I realized how fragile our culture was at that moment. And it's funny because I felt horrible for the people that we had laid off, because they were going into a world where it was nearly impossible to find a job. But the people that stayed with us were paranoid every day whether they were going to lose their job. Instead of cutting hard and fast like everyone tells you should, I love people. I care a lot about our team members. They're part of my family. Anyone that says work and business are separate has never owned a business, because work is personal. And I just remember thinking at that moment, it was really important to me that one of the takeaways from that experience is that we had to build a rock solid culture, that we had to invest more in our people, that we needed to be prepared for the next crisis. And thankfully, when COVID came around, we were able to navigate that without laying any people off and without having to go through the same pains. But I think it taught me in that moment that we just have to be more adaptable. We have to continue to learn and grow and change and shift and evolve, but we can't do it. We have to do that without losing our people first approach. So I think I think it's just something that my love for people and building teams, and I love being an entrepreneur because it's certainly helped me create the life that I want. But I think that just lifelong learning and adaptability and people first focus is the reason why.
It's the concept of, or the strategy, not the concept, the strategy of offshoring, the strategy of looking outside to help with this war on talent, to help with the inability to find somebody local who can do the work all the time, that there are other alternatives, but it's scary. Can you give an example tell us about a company that you've worked with that made a big shift in their talent strategy, and what was the impact that it made?
Yeah. So one company that comes to mind is in the accounting world. And I don't have permission to necessarily share their name, but I'll just talk about it in general. So this is a company that when we first started working with them, small business accounting, they had approximately somewhere around 30 accounting professionals on their team. Today, they have approximately 45, and 15 of those are with us. And what they were able to do is, so one of the challenges in accounting is that there are more CPAs leaving the workforce that are entering the workforce, right? And so the what I would call that strategic talent layer is shrinking. And so they're having to figure out, how do I get more leverage for those individuals? And there are great places across the world that have proficiency in internationally accepted accounting standards. Philippines is one of those really great hubs for that. And so this particular organization was really concerned about data and security and personally identifiable information. They were really concerned about, is the talent going to be productive? And to our conversation earlier, can I work with them in a remote environment and be successful because we're all in an office? And so, we spent quite a bit of time first working with them on their management practices. How do you make this successful when you're all in an office and now you got this team offshore? And so we had to help them sort of think through some of those rhythms to make that likelihood of succeeding easier. And then we had to obviously overcome what I would call the technology hurdles. Now, we happen to have invested heavily in our data and security infrastructure, and so that was less of an issue, but it's a significant concern for any business. I mean, as you all know, technology is a really exciting, it's an exciting time for technology just because of where AI and some of these emerging technologies are. But those can all be weaponized. And so it is a really concerning time. But what they were able to do is effectively bring on accountants, bookkeepers, finance professionals that give their senior team more leverage. And so what they actually did is, it's funny, they've maintained the same number of team members in the US. So no jobs were eliminated in the US. This was not a cost-cutting exercise. This was a scalability opportunity for them. And so what they've been able to do, though, is bring on junior team members to do a lot of that early stage work and let their senior team members get out of the detail work and actually stay at the strategic layer, and they're able to get more out of their team as a result of that. So, for them, they've been able to grow their business. They've been able to increase their margin and actually improve their culture, because some of their people here in the US now are managing team members in other locations, and they wouldn't have been given that opportunity to manage or supervise or train had they not done that. So it's actually hit on all three of the things that I think are really important about building a global talent strategy. And then the last thing I'll say, which I think was an unknown benefit when they first started on this, is they've also been able to create a 24/7 cycle. So some of their team members do work synchronously with their US counterparts, but others are on an asynchronous schedule. So the work continues when the partners are going home and they're with their families and they go to bed, work is being done. And when they get back, there's already work that's been completed back in their inbox, ready for review and continued motion. So it's given them greater efficiency.
Just yesterday, I did a half-day strategy development with my accounting client, and we were looking at trends. We were talking about what are the trends that need to be paid attention to, things that we either need to insulate ourselves from, or opportunities that we can capitalize on. And one of the senior partners literally said, major trend in our industry is again, in the accounting space, that a lot of the work is either moving to AI, and it's going to be done by AI, or it's moving to, and he specifically mentioned, the Philippines. Now, in that conversation, one of the things that they talked about, what you've already touched on, there's the PII, the personally identifiable information concern, there's the data privacy and all the hoops that they have to jump through here locally to make sure that they're protecting information. And then what happens if we offshore that information? How do we protect that? You've touched on that. But the other thing, and you touched on it a little bit at the end, is it's the different work cycles, right? That what time is it even in the Philippines right now? And how will we possibly manage them or make sure that they're working? And so how do you overcome, if there's a listener who's in any industry who's thinking, gosh, we have a hard enough time managing our people 9 to 5 here in the US, and now we're going to introduce overnight employees, like our time. How do you help allay those concerns?
Yeah. So, first of all, let me back up for 2 seconds. The reason I started Doxa in the first place is because I started outsourcing through my previous company, Guidant Financial, and culture, as I said earlier, is really important to me. And so I decided, you know what, most offshore workers never meet the teams that they support. So I decided, you know what, I'm going to make it a regular thing. Every 6 months, I'm just going to fly out to the Philippines and break bread with the team. In those cultures, we're task-based in terms of how we build trust. If you do what you say you do, I trust you. In those cultures, their commitment, their trust is built on, do I know your family? Have we shared stories? Have we broken bread? And so I started investing in those relationships by just simply flying across the world to have dinner and spend time with them. In doing so, though, I realized there's a lot about the industry that I don't like. And I think that most of the last 2 or 3 decades as outsourcing has become prevalent with businesses, is I think that the outsourcing industry is won on the backs of workers. And so we wanted to bring a socially conscious solution to the market, one that valued people even over the clients, and valued things like security and training and so on and so forth. But one of the things I didn't like is that the company that we worked with previously required everyone to work our hours, and they required them to work our holidays. So if you can imagine, the holidays don't all perfectly overlap, and our time zone makes it so they're even on different days. So you imagine if you were asked to come to work on holiday you love, Christmas Eve, Thanksgiving, whatever that was. I think that's just terrible. And so one of the things I also didn't like is that you could see the physical toll it takes on people when they work all night long. Now, some choose to do it, and it's acceptable in that culture. But actually what we decided to do is engineer split shifts. And a split shift means that somebody can start at 4 a.m. their time. So it's early in the morning in the Philippines, but it's 2 o'clock here for me in Mountain Standard Time. It'd be 1 o'clock in the afternoon for you. Well, if you work a traditional 8 to 5, that still gives you 4 hours for reviewing work, one-on-ones, team meetings, culture building, and still gives them 4 hours of completely unobstructed time to go do their job. So you can actually do both simultaneously. You can actually do something that's good for the health of the worker, still extend the timeline at which work is being done, and still have plenty of time for that collaboration, that communication, that innovation. So I think you can have your cake and eat it too. I think that's what business is, right? Like there was a great mentor of mine when I first started that told me, hey, Dave, once you write a business plan, it's wrong. I was like, oh, wow, that's great. It hit me square in the chest. I used to write a business plan and be like, that is etched in stone and it's gold. I am super smart. And then, it never worked out the way that you thought it was going to be. And the moment he said this to me, I was like, you're right. It's all about putting your best foot forward and then learning and adapting. I think the faster we learn and adapt, the more competitive we'll be.
David, one of the phrases that gets kicked around, in future-proofing your business. We're all trying to future-proof our business, whatever that actually means. But when you think about if a CEO is trying to build their team only from the local labor pool, what are they risking? What's the risk of not considering doing it differently?
Okay, can we get nerdy for a second? I will answer your question. Let me write it down actually here. So this is something actually that I've spent a lot of time thinking about, a lot of time researching, and I don't think people are paying attention to. So I'm going to give a little bit of a history lesson and tie it into today, okay? So birth rates have been sliding for the last 50 plus years. it used to be before, even World War II, right? We all lived outside the urban centers. We had farms. And as a result of that, we needed a lot of labor. So what did we do? We had kids. We had kids because they were free labor. They were an asset. But after World War II, industrial era takes over, and all of a sudden we're moving into the urban centers and we're trading those farms for apartments. And the kids now become an expense versus an asset. Simultaneously, women are now coming into the workforce in droves, and contraception is now reliable and it's a norm. So, 50 years ago, depending on where you were in the world, you had somewhere between 4.5 and 7 kids. And I guess technically you can't have 4.5 kids. So you had 4 to 7 kids. Today, that's now 2.4. And actually in the US, it's 1.78. And just to replace our population, we need 2.1. So we've dipped below. And so there's this thing called population pyramids. And I geek out on this stuff, right? There's 4 different types of population pyramids. There's a rapid growth pyramid where you have, basically the young people in your population is much wider than those that are aging out of it. And then as move to a slow growth cycle, it's a little taller pyramid. And then you have a pillar population like the US today, which basically means we have the same amount of old people as we have young people in all the different age bands. And then when it inverts, that's when you have a contraction. And it's directly tied to economic impact. So if you look at the US today, we're a pillar population. And in fact, actually, the belt buckle started tightening. If you look at some of my favorite places to travel, Greece, Italy, Spain. I was just in Korea. You see a lot more elderly people than young people. Well, guess what you see in their economy? Companies leaving, industries being decimated, and tourism becomes about the only thing that they can actually rely on any longer. So this has been happening under the hood for a long period of time. The US is in decline, and over the next few decades, it'll become even more acute. So you've got the fact that people want to work remotely. Well, let me start here. You have a shrinking population per se. And then if you're a local only company, you've now taken that talent pool and shrunk it to a very small number of people. There is a statistic that the US Career Institute put out recently that was, I think it was 51% of workers never want to go to an office. What's funny though is only 5% actually want to go to an office. 44% want you to pay for something that they'll use on occasion, which makes no sense as we talked about earlier. And so the reality is very, very few people want to be in an office. So being local, cool. But the risk is not a lot of people are going to want to come to your office for a long period of time. So you just shrunk your pool considerably less by staying local, unless you absolutely have to. I will say this too, by the way, just to kind of go back to that though. We talked about career development being a big issue. There was McKinsey did a study as well, and it talked about 36% of people are also unhappy with compensation. And if you're intentionally or unintentionally creating a smaller talent pool for yourself, you've got talent scarcity issues. The talent's the one that has the power. So wage inflation is going to just be more acute for that audience. So I think there's a lot of benefits to being local. I mean, certainly the connection is hard to replace. Like, I love being on a call with you two here, but it'd be an even better energy if we were sitting in a room. That's reality. But the workforce has already told us what they really want. And I think it's time for leaders to just accept that that's where the puck is going, and we need to go there.
I have one more question before we move to get practical. Patsy, I also want to give you an opportunity. I know you said before we started rolling, you had a whole lot more questions for David than you normally do, and you usually come with a good arsenal. So my last question, David, is if I'm listening and either I'm ready, but I just don't know how to pursue the offshore life or the offshore world, or I'm intrigued and I just want to find out more. Obviously, I mean, there's something called the internet. I can go read, but what's a good first step? What's an easy step for a listener if they want to start learning a little bit more about it?
Well, I think you're right. I mean, there's lots of great online resources. Our site has plenty. Lots of other companies do as well. I think I would start by trying to learn and understand what capabilities there are. I mean, I think most people, when they think about outsourcing, they think about virtual assistants. It's the lowest level work. I can particularly find someone to sort my email, maybe post social media. But what's actually really interesting is what we've found is that the further you move up in the org chart, the more value you can extract. And so I think just being aware of what are some of the possibilities out there and the types of roles that are being filled. I think that would help people sort of understand what types of talent are available. I think it's also really important for people to be clear, what are the problems they're trying to solve? I always tell people, like, think about all your priorities. We try to, as leaders, we always say, like, hey, if you have more than 2 or 3 priorities, you don't actually have a priority, right? But there's always that, 4th or 5th one that you really want to get to, but you just don't have the capacity to get to. Those are the kind of things that global talent can be really helpful, either giving leverage to your existing workforce to get to those things or actually just side projects for them. And there's lots of ways to do it, from project-based work to, contractors to full-time and dedicated people. So I think lots of opportunities. I would just say, do a little research on the web. And if you find a company that aligns with your values, because that's really important, then have a conversation with them. We spend probably half of our time with a new prospect just simply educating them on opportunities and helping them think about how do they increase capacity, how do they increase margin, how do they improve culture, and how do they access better talent faster during using outsourcing as a strategy.
I think I asked earlier about how I'm hearing more and more people say, people don't have the human skills. How do we develop the human skills in our people? And when I asked that earlier, I think you had a really thoughtful answer.
Yeah, well, look, we see it, right? We especially see it in the younger generations. I mean, there's from the employee standpoint, you've got the I don't know, they're Gen Xers, boomers, they're what I would call the traditionalists. And then you've got sort of these emerging categories, which are the caretakers. These are people that are taking care of a parent or a child and they need to work from home. And then the do-it-yourselfer and the idealists are actually the largest segment. They're the youngest group. They're technologically enabled. Many of them actually missed schooling because of COVID, and they've been babysat by devices for the last decade with busy parents who just didn't have enough time. So you are seeing on the younger generations, some of them have underdeveloped social skills, and so I was sharing. We have a learning and development team. I would venture to guess that at least half of the content that we're creating and we're training our people on is related to soft skills. Some of it is stuff related to business. Other is actually cultural. And we talked about some of those nuances, but the way that we build relationships, make decisions, think about the hierarchy in our organization, how we decide, all these things are very different across different cultures. And so we have to, continue to train. But I think it's really important that whether you use outsourced talent or not, that we're investing in developing people as human beings and also professionals, because I don't think you can clearly divide that line any further. A lot of people like to treat business and personal as if they're separate, and they are just so intertwined, especially in a remote environment. I think that's our responsibility as leaders. 100%. I mean, one of our values is relationship matters, and the first principle under there is we get the best of our team when their mind, their body, and their families are healthy. That's the first principle. The first principle is take care of the family and the human being before you worry about the professional.
There's definite alignment there. All right, David, thank you. That's all awesome. Now, we end every show with what we call Let's Get Practical, because the last thing we want is for this to be interesting and informative and then nothing come from it. The value, the ROI always comes from the doing, the walking it out, the execution. So we'll kick it to you. We'll let you go first. What are 2 or 3 suggestions you have for, again, it can be something that we covered today. It's just a quick point that you want to recap, or it could be something we didn't talk about today. But what advice would you have for a frustrated CEO that can help move them forward in their business?
Okay, I'll try to be really concise. There's a couple things that come to mind. So one is, we talked about this earlier. I think it's when I first started when I started my first business, I was a fairly young CEO, And I felt like I always had to have all the answers. I'd walk into a room and I would spout off all the answers, even if I wasn't sure. And I think over time, what I realized is we have to be better at empowering our team members and pushing more authority and autonomy into the organization. And I think listening to our people is one of the most important skills that we need to learn. So when we talked about, where are we getting feedback, I think actively asking from people that are the closest to the work, closest to the customer for feedback on how we continue to grow and improve, I think is a really important skill. The second thing, which we really didn't get time to today, but at some point, would love to discuss, is how to think about the intersection of AI and talent. Because AI, I think this is one of the most exciting times that I've ever been a part of, and I was part of when the internet, really became a mainstream. I remember being part of a company where we were told we were never going to be allowed to email anyone outside the company. And of course, that didn't last very long. But I think for companies that are slow to adapt, this is an existential threat. But if you're fast, if you're innovative, I think it's an extraordinary opportunity. So what we're investing in right now is training growth hackers, people that are really excited about going into a company and helping them look at some of the challenges in their business and think about how can we look at AI first, software second, and then people third to solve these business problems. And I think that's a mentality that CEOs are going to need to take now in an aggressive way.
One that's near and dear to both of our hearts, Patrick, is be intentional about your culture. We say that, how do we do things around here? So that is one. Introduce the kind of culture you want to create, practice it, train for it, retrain, practice again. We always say it's organic. So let's see. Empowering your employees to do their best as a core value. As your heart value said, there's 5 areas, know their purpose, that they're client oriented, that they have access to leadership, they build connected teams, and that they have a career path.
All right. I have a couple that I thought really insightful and very practical. One kind of an acknowledgement that if remote fails, it's a failure of leadership, not a failure of the strategy. Right. And so if it's not working, I always say, man, do the mirror work. Like start in the mirror and figure out what can I do differently, and how can we as a team adjust our leadership approach. I like this short little nugget. Anyone who'll be impacted downstream needs to be involved in the decision making upstream. Again, it's just something that we forget so often, and then we roll something out and there's confusion and chaos because people didn't have a say. And then we find out when we try to roll it out that it actually doesn't work because of how it lands downstream. And then as David, is something you said pretty early on, if you're not consistently and constantly evolving your practices, then you're going to die out. And and maybe that speaks to the AI. And I just read something yesterday. It was earlier today. Read something, as a comment that somebody made on Reddit of all places, that if I see a company that's using AI to generate their images, I'm not going to shop there. They're going to lose my business. And it was interesting that the sentiment behind it was that you should be supporting a local photographer, or you should be, supporting a local designer. And the number of comments that followed that, people like, yeah, that's, it's nice thought, but, and you're welcome to, you get to choose where you shop, but AI has opened up so much more creativity for, it's about evolving your business practices. And
yeah. That's an interesting one, because I think if you look historically at every major technological innovation, from the printing press to the combustion engine to the internet, and here we are today. Yeah, there are some industries that are impacted by those things, no question. But in every case, it actually created more jobs and more opportunity. And I hear what that person says, and I understand the theory behind it. I'm a shop local kind of guy. I love the sentiment behind it. But if I dug in my heels and said, nope, it's horse and buggy, this car thing is just not going to happen, like where would I be today? I think the reality is the world is going to change whether we like it or not. And that person gets to choose what they're willing to spend their money on, and I think that's okay. But I don't know. I'm a big fan of just not trying to fight big technological changes, but rather figure out how do we win with it. I'll just add one more. I think, again, I'm just thinking about the places that I've failed over and over again, and I think the place that I've really evolved is in just that vulnerability or authenticity as a leader. I think I used to be afraid that people would know that I was an imposter. They would know that I didn't have all the answers. And what you actually find, people are drawn to that vulnerability, to being able to help and being invited in to help. So I think, if there's something I would tell, I don't know if it's going to apply to every one of your listeners, but especially the young CEOs, is I think feedback is your friend, but I think vulnerability gives you, I think it's just such an appreciated skill.
I am going to share that exact piece of advice with one of the executives that I'm working with currently. We're talking quite a bit about how vulnerability is. It came out during the pandemic. It's one of the traits that employees want most in their leader today is vulnerability, authenticity. Because go back to the pandemic, everybody was going through stuff. And if you have a leader that's unapproachable or lacks empathy, or can't go, yeah, this is hard, I'm dealing with it myself, then they present themselves as unrelatable, unapproachable.
I was talking about the fact that 40% of people looking for a job, 30% of them actually cite it as an unaspiring or indifferent leader. And I think just make sure you take time to connect with your team as people if they feel that you actually genuinely care about them. And I mean genuinely, not connecting just for ticking that box, but I think it goes a long way in terms of retention and productivity and doing the right thing by you and your business. I have a podcast called The Future is Borderless. You can check it out on YouTube. It's on Spotify as well. But if you want to learn more about some of the work we're doing at Doxa Talent, it's simply doxatalent.com. It's DOXA talent.com. And then I'm on LinkedIn, and I do respond to all messages personally. It's not a bot and it's not an EA. So if you want to have a conversation on any of these topics or more, I'd certainly invite it.
Excellent. David Nilssen, thank you so much for joining us. Topic that absolutely is relevant to our listeners. Listener, thank you for sticking with us to the end of another episode of the Frustrated CEO podcast. If you are interested in learning more about us, please, or connecting with us, you can connect with Patsy and I both on LinkedIn, as well as if you're listening, check us out on YouTube. Just do a search for the Frustrated CEO podcast. And then definitely connect with us. We have our own LinkedIn company page as well. We're at the Lions Group on LinkedIn. So connect, let's engage. And if you're interested in being a guest on a future episode, then best way to do that is communicate with us through LinkedIn. David, thank you so much. Yeah, appreciate it. Yeah, it was great. Listener, we'll see you again next time on the Frustrated CEO podcast.